So welcome to the overhead pull push bend workout. So I've got the basic pull up here. So you really want to get this down, nice controlled movement, get a nice stretch at the bottom for your lats, keeping the ribs in. As you come up, you want to pull, keeping that core tight so you're not flaring the ribs, getting the shoulder blades down and back. You see the little lift there is a little bit more of a challenge. Once you've got that down, then you can raise the rings up and then start working on a heavier version with a bit more of a jump and an eccentric. So lining them up is really important when you're doing any ring work. So bringing them together like that's the easiest way to make sure. Then I'm jumping, controlling all the way down. Now you can see here my feet will touch just before I lock out, because that's usually the weakest point. So you want to start off with a little bit of assistance there from the ground, because that's when a lot of people can just drop. So and then I take it to the next level, and then this way you can go all the way down into that full dead hang without touching the ground. But I just always get people to just do that little touch for a while first, because some people can just drop and then they lose control. And they'll flare the ribs as the arms go overhead. So you have to work really hard there to keep those obliques active so the rib cage doesn't just destabilize and the spine extends. And it's such a great stretch, the bottom of the pull-up. And you can even at the bottom, I just pause at the bottom of every pull-up and try and pull my hands behind my head like I'm doing an arm raise or like handstand position with the ribs in. Yeah, setting the straps up can be a bit challenging sometimes. But here, just using one ring for the pull-up with the band. And I like one because it gets a bit funky trying to hold it between the two rings. So here you can just do an underhand grip, a little bit like a parallel grip on the sides there. But you see here, as I come down, I bend the legs. And then as I go up, I straighten the legs. And what that does, it keeps a bit more even tension. A lot of people bag out the band training or the use of bands for pull-ups. But it's because, and I accept the main reason, which is when the body goes down, the band will straighten right out. And then when people come up, it's less help, and when they're at the bottom, it's more help. So to even it out, you just bend the legs as you go down, and that way the assistance is more even. You could be really tricky and just keep it just like a centimetre off the ground for when you're at the top, and then make sure it stays that centimetre the whole time, and that would work quite well to keep an even amount of assistance. So once you're going into full body weight ones, it's important to get strong from the bottom, from that dead hang, and then I like that nice external rotation as you pull, and then trying to maintain that when you come down, rather than just letting it collapse into internal rotation. So you want to maintain that stability in the shoulder, but get a full overhead stretch, so it really helps with the overhead pressing. So getting nice clean movements, really square. And then if you want to advance that, you can go to the single arm rotation and shift the weight over to one arm. But the one arm pull up is a long journey. It does take a lot of connective tissue strength as well as just strength. Awesome power to weight ratio. So I like, kind of just working these, keeping it basic, and then going into weighted ones. Here I've got the bar, so it holds me in that external rotation, and I'm really pulling the ribs in, getting that maximum stretch, maintaining stability through the ribs, and then getting that chest up nice and high, stretching out and using it as a stretch. Here's an older clip. I'm a bit stronger here, but here you can see, if you watch the ribs when I pull, that bit of an arch and a flare, which you want to try and avoid. I mean, obviously there's a decent amount of load there, 60 kilos added to the pull-up. So here, got the overhead press using just the band. The band's actually quite good here because it really helps you feel that line as you press up overhead, and works quite hard trying to keep the ribs in as you press up. And I like the spot of the ceiling, so that way I'm actually training for the handstand. So you don't want to let the elbows flare out. There you can see a little bit of a flare. It's quite heavy, and really trying to shrug up and keep the ribs in, so not letting that back arch and break in the midline. Trying to press overhead, and I try and spot up, so that way I get better crossover of that strength into my handstand line. So you can see there, trying to maintain rib stability, and shoulders will come back. As you press up, the shoulders move forward, ribs come in, and there's that line there that you're looking for. So the dumbbells are great. If you don't have dumbbells, the band's quite good. There's some body weight versions coming up, but they are a really good tool for developing this. I wish I'd spent more time doing this, because now I'm having to go back and work on it to clean it all up. And I like this version, not letting the dumbbells rotate, trying to maintain that external rotation. Here, sitting down adds in that control through the hip flexors to not round out the lower back, so I'm maintaining that hip flexor contraction while I'm pressing overhead. And then here, the bodyweight versions I like people to start on is going from like a planche position there and then pressing back overhead, so really pushing. And that keeps the serratus anterior engaged. So integrating a push-up is great, and that way you're getting that bent arm strength with that overhead position. You can go to the horizontal pull-push squat variation that's on a raised surface and makes this a lot easier. But you're really looking for that nice overhead line and really pressing up the whole time. As you walk forward here, more weight's going into the shoulders, so it gets a lot heavier. And you're seeing as I come down, it goes into that tripod position and then pressing up. So the head doesn't come in between the wrists, it goes forward. So that way it's setting you up to get a nice balanced handstand push-up. You see a bit more load there, pressing right up, really trying to get that nice finish at the top. Really trying to hinge in the hips and getting a bit more weight. And here I've raised the hands a little bit with the dumbbells, and then you can raise them again and raise the legs to get it a little bit deeper and get it heavier. So here we're going into the deadlift variations. So basic bend, hinging through the hip and using the hands on the knees, then taking the hands off the knees. These versions all work great for getting control through the hips. So a wider stance is a little bit easier for some people with the hamstrings. Then going straight leg to really hinge in the hips and make it purely hamstring, and with an isometric spine, but no knee bend. So you're saving that for the squats. So I'm mostly training kind of straight leg stuff for my bends and then squatting heavier. But yeah, you can mix it up. I like to run things for about 8 weeks to really get that adaptation and then change it over, but somewhere between 4 and 8 or even up to 12 if it's going well and you're still progressing. Here you've got the single leg ones with a bent knee and then going with a straight leg, hinging in the hip. So these are quite hard. If you don't have any extra weights to work with, these are great because you're getting the weight of the upper body on that one leg. So if you've got both feet down, that it's not as heavy because you're shifting the weight between the legs. This is a good one as well. If you're not quite ready for doing the straight leg version of the single leg one, then this one works quite well to strengthen it. Then here we've got the wide position. Now I'm keeping a very vertical spine, so a lot of people, if they've had any back problems, you want to initiate the deadlift like that, so that way it's less load in the spine, and then you can see I've gone to a deeper and deeper bend position, and then straight leg, really hinging in the hip. So that's quite heavy on the hamstrings and heavy on that spine to keep it isometric contraction. And then here doing the single leg loaded there, strengthening that. This one's quite nice, so you've got the back leg bent so the knees are kind of level, hips are level, and then you hinge through the hips. And that gives you that overstretch in the front leg. That's quite cool. And then here going into the single arm, single leg loaded version, which is nice, great control. This is a really good practical movement for stabilization, just for life, living, sport, whatever. And then here the straight leg, straight back. This is quite heavy on the hamstring. This one's great for anyone that's into the gymnastic strength. So we hear a lot about straight arm training, but straight leg training is also really important if you want to do any kind of acrobatic work. So you get strong there. Good. So using 2 dumbbells is obviously more load, so you can take more load into the spine using both hands. So much heavier. There's just the basic one, and then going into a bit more of a hip hinge, and then straight leg, straight back. So these are quite challenging on the hamstrings. So here I've got a heavier version and going deeper than the floor, so coming right down, hinging the hip, so really challenging it there, which is quite cool. And then going into the barbell version, so I'm holding a snatch grip so that way it can go deeper as well. So there's always a way to make it harder, and then just your standard kind of deadlift coming up where I'm using just a normal bent knee, so it's not as heavy on the hamstrings at that end range, but it allows you to lift a lot heavier. So film yours, get them back to me. It's really important you film yours and film them from the side or film them from an angle where I can see, and I can coach you, work the rep ranges that are good for you, so that way you can develop in a nice way, and that way it keeps the risk right down low. Enjoy, guys.